Good morning, everyone. Today we'll be looking at Bezier curves. As the name suggests, it's a type of a curve, but first we'll begin with the idea of the linear curve, and then we'll move on to quadratic curves, and finally we'll reach our final destination, which is the cubic Bezier curves. So what about curves? It's just a simple curve is just a simple hyperbola, right? It can be in the form the quadratic ones. A linear suggests that it would be just a straight line, right? And a quadratic suggests that it would be in the form of a hyperbola in terms of an x squared equation for for someone who understands math, and in terms of an x cubed one for a cubic Bezier curve, as the name suggests, and is very apparent and prominent from over there. However, but before we start explaining this, we're gonna first look at the idea of interpolation between points, right? So consider these 2 points, x0 and x1. For example, x0 is your home and x1 is your school. So when you have to walk a certain distance to reach to x1 from x0, right? You just don't start over here and just directly reach over here, which the straight line suggests, and that's not true, right? You have to take each bit of steps to reach at a certain point. So consider every step that you're taking as a single point along the way, right? So it would look something like this. Now we'll get to the equation that's written here later on, but the idea of this is that you take one step and then take another step, and this combination of step creates a line which is over here, right? So this is the idea of interpolation, that to reach from one point to another point, you take a few specified steps, and basically the amount of steps that you're taking will obviously depend on how long your step is, right? For example, if you're running, your steps will be lesser, and if you're walking, your steps will be more. So that's going to be determined by this equation over here. These number of dots that are over here can increase these dots, I could decrease these dots, depend on over here. So what this equation is basically like really simple. What this is saying is essentially is you take this x0 value over here and you subtract the distance between these 2 points, and you times that distance by a certain value t. So essentially what this does is that it lets you reach directly to a certain point between these 2 points. For example, if t's value is 0.5 and x naught is 0 and x1 is 2, so if you put it, it's going to be 0 plus t times, which is 0.5 times 2, which means 1. So it means halfway between these 2 points, which will be somewhere around over here, right? So this is pretty self-explanatory. So if you start with like a really small t, for example 0.01, you're going to start over here, and if you keep incrementing that t's value, you're going to get over here, then here, then here, then here, and finally up until you reach to x1, right? So in computer science, you can think of it as a for loop in terms of for t, right? The t is going to start from 0, from all the way over here 0, and it's going to go all the way over here at 1. So it's going to be basically a decimal point value, and it's going to keep incrementing by a certain amount that you want it to be. So the smaller the value of t, the more the number of points that you're going to see, because there will be smaller incrementations in the path that you're taking. Okay, now let's keep the idea of interpolation at a side, and now look at the curves, like the quadratic curves, as the x squared equation suggests. So this is a pretty straightforward, curve. Like this is a minimum curve, this is a maximum curve, as you all can tell, and the x minimum point is determined. Is basically just the minimum point, and xm over here is just the maximum point, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna move forward explaining how we arrive at this particular curve or this particular curve. So what we're essentially going to be doing is that you're going to take uh, what this point is actually doing. Think of it this way. This point is basically bending the line that we had is initially over here. It's basically asking this line, it's basically pulling this line downwards according to wherever the point will reside. So for example, I had it midway between, as I calculated earlier, I had it midway between the lines. When I pulled it down, it pulled the line down from the middle, making it into a quadratic, some sort of quadratic curve. When I will pull it upwards, it will be a maximum upper curve, right? So we're going to move forward with this idea in mind over here, and we're going to look at this. Basically the same thing that we did with the line over here, this linear interpolation of the lines, we're going to do with the curve too. But basically we don't have the equation of the curve. We don't have the whole equation of the curve. We only have the linear equation of the curve. There's something similar about this particular thing which we had over here. Instead of having 2 main points over here, we now have 3 main points over here. So something of this sort of pops up in your head. I'm going to show you why I'm doing this in a while. However, to understand this, you have to bear with me for a while. So basically what's happening is that you have this point, this main point, this main point, and this main point, right? And then what you can do, you can choose to connect these points, x0 to xm and xm to x1, right? Why we'll do this, bear with me, I'll let you know in some time. So it's going to look something like this, right? So basically what you're doing is you're joining x0 to xm and then xm to x1. You have 2 straight lines, and you're going to apply the same thing that you did up over here. You're going to interpolate between these 2 points, and then you're going to interpolate between these 2 points, right? So what happens is that these 2 separate lines will have their own interpolation equations, as you can see over here. You will have this xa point, which is basically just x naught and xm, and xa is the value of this equation at any particular value of t. Similarly, xb is the equation, it is the point value, is the x value of this equation at any particular value of t. And keep in mind that I'm doing this for only x value. However, you can obviously this point, right? So you can apply the same thing for the x values to get x and y coordinates for any point along these two lines, right? So basically, and what the idea is that you're going to take these points and then you're going to lerp these 2 points again in another equation like this. What is this doing? What is this saying? Basically, this is saying that, for example, t's value will get you the first point over here, right? For example, for this line, it's going to get you the first value over here, and for this line, it's going to get you the first value over here. By lerping these 2 points, you're basically saying that take those 2 points and join it by using a line. For example, maybe like a line like this, right? You join it like a line like this, and then what happens is basically, well, let me show you the line. Right, they're saying basically when you take these 2 points, you join it using a line, and then you lerp them again with a specific value of t, right? So this, we have created another line by using 2 lines. And now what this is basically doing is, for example, if t's value is initially half, so what it's going to do is it's going to create a point over here at the half, right? We will be referring to this point in between, because xa and xb is any value of is any point along this line and any point along this line, and we're connecting them together. So once you do this for all the points, you're going to reach up with something like this. This looks really incredible, right? You already have your curve over here. You have this xm point at 0.5 value, and when you drag it down, you have this thing, and the lines go like this and this and this, and they go from downward sloping to upward sloping all the way here until you reach towards a curve. And with all the changing values of t, you basically get you basically get your points will be like dot 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 over here. And there are 2 things happening simultaneously. Number one is you're changing the t value constantly while this is happening. So the t value for every line will be different. What will that achieve? That will achieve a simple thing, that for example, this is a straight line that is connected. Now there will be another line that's connecting these 2 points, and as we are moving along the points, the t value is also changing. So for this line, the t value will be up here. As we move down, or we increase the points, or we increase the number of lines that it takes, the t value also moves along these paths. Like for example, for this particular first line, the t value over here. For the second line, the t value will be a little further than that, and so on and so forth until we reach this smooth curve. And note that obviously the type of the curve and the shape of the curve will obviously depend on this xm value. So this xm value can be moved to over here, so the curve will look something like this, and the minimum point will obviously be just above this point, which is over here, right? So this was the basic idea of the quadratic Bezier curve. I think I've explained it sufficiently. However, now we'll be moving on to the cubic curves. So basically what we'll be doing is that we'll be using the idea of linear interpolation of the lerping equation over here. So basically for the quadratic, what we did, we used this equation and we added it to another equation by getting the values from this over here, just like this. We took this value of the lerp equation, we took this value of the lerp equation, and then lerped it again to get another set, another pair, or another single value of x between these 2 points, right? Which was basically a point along this line, the new line that we created. So it's pretty simple and obvious when you follow the same pattern for the cubic one, is that you're going to take now these 2 values and then you're going to lerp it again. So basically you have you're going to be having you're going to be having 4 such lines, and then you'll be lerping them and then lerping them again and then lerping them again until you get a straight single line. So this is the idea that for example, if you see these points, because a cubic curve obviously has a minimum point and also a maximum point, even though it's not necessary, but just a general x cubed curve will have those, right? So keeping that in mind, what you're going to do, you can essentially see these 3 points over here. I'm sorry, forgot to rename it, so I'll just rename it like xm1, which will be the minimum point of the curve, and xm2, which will be the maximum point of the curve over here, right? So basically you have these 4 points. How can you divide them to reach a 2 pair of quadratics, which when joined together will create a cubic curve? What I'm trying to basically say is that you'll have this curve like this, right? And then you're gonna use the same curve, flip it around to create a cubic one like this, voila. However, the catch over here is that this pair of points should be joined together. So how will you achieve that, really? So basically what you're trying to do is that you're going to be dividing this equation or this whole curve into a pair of 3 points. How are you going to do that? So earlier what you did in the quadratic one was you divided the whole line into a pair of 2 curves, right? The x naught and xm and x1. So the for the first line, the starting point was x naught, and for the second line the starting point was xm. Similarly over here you're going to divide it into, since it's a cubic one, so you're going to divide it into 3 points, right? So the first point will be x naught, xm1 and xm2. And the second point will be xm1, xm2, and x1. So what this will achieve essentially is this is going to achieve a quadratic curve with a downward slope, and a quadratic curve within, sorry, not a downward slope, with a minimum point, and a quadratic curve with a maximum point. So basically, you're going to be interpreting between x0 and xm2 and xm1 and x1, just as you did for the quadratic curve. So looking at this diagram over of the quadratic over here, where did I have that? Oh yeah, it's over here basically. So initially your quadratic was just like this, right? It was going from over here to over here with an xm1 point over at a 50 percent between x0 and x1, right? You took the similar idea, and by using these 4 points, now you have a quadratic curve that goes from x0 to xm2 like this, which is some intermediary point in between, or over here essentially. So you have this quadratic curve like this, and then you took xm1, xm2 and x1, so you have a quadratic curve like this. How amazing is that? And you join them all together to form a perfect cubed curve. However, there's one catch over here. The catch over here is that for for the xm point over here, it was just midway between these 2 points. However, now to keep it symmetric, I've lowered the xm point to the 25th value and xm2 to the 75% value between x0 and x1. So basically, xm2's t value will be 0.75 and xm1's t value will be 0.25. And I hope this is quite self-explanatory. However, and this is how we reach the cubic Bezier curve, by using this Lerv equation of a simple maths. And in a while, I'm going to go to the Wikipedia page to show you that we've done exactly what was over there, and it was pretty simple maths, right? You can just to get the exact point, obviously when you're going to be lerping using the power equation and so on and so forth, so you're going to get a different equation to get the exact value of these points along this line. So you're going to get basically a cubic curve according to your value of t. So I'm going to be showing you that in a while. Okay, so we're on the Wikipedia page over here, and they're talking about the linear Bezier curve, the quadratic Bezier curve, and also the cubic Bezier curve right over here, right? So we're going to begin with over here. They have the equation of p naught plus t. This is basically our x naught. This is x1, x2. This is the same equation. They've converted this into taking out the factor of t, and they've converted this equation. So these are basically similar equations, and they're talking about the idea of linear interpolation. Linear interpolation is a method of curve fitting using linear polynomials to construct a new data. So basically, this is a complex language, but I explained it in pretty simple terms using the example of this walking to the school thing, right? So this is, and you can see the value of t is between 0 and 1, or as you would like to call it, from between 0 and 100%, right? So when you put this equation inside itself at values of p naught and p1, so instead of p naught, you're going to want to get another equation, right? So it's going to be 1 minus t, this whole equation, and then plus t times this whole equation again. So this is essentially what's doing, right? 1 minus t, this whole equation, plus t times this whole equation again, and so the value is going to range from 0 to 1. And the idea that I was talking about between the lines and the line that I show you, basically that they've drawn this over here using the colorful lines, and you can get these points as you move along the values, and these points will gonna get you the get you the quadratic curves, and as you move these points, the points are also gonna move. So you have it over here, and I'm going to show you in the paint application that I created how does it look visually, right? And the math behind it too. So this is the quadratic curve, and they've just like this. When you get this equation, then you take this value of p and insert the equation linear. When you get this quadratic equation, you insert the value instead of p1 and p2, you insert this whole equation again into that, and for the cubic one, you're going to do the same too. And then you are finally going to be reaching this equation, which is going to get you the basically p naught, p naught, p1, p2, and p3 are, p naught is basically x naught, p1 is xm1, this is xm2, and this is x1 basically. So by putting in these values in the value of t, you can directly fetch the values of t accordingly. So this was all about the quadratic Bezier curve. I'm just going to show you in the implementation now. I had to record this again because my screen recorded another window, so that sucked. But anyways, so this is basically my paint application, and I know it has a pretty basic UI, but let's get right into it, right? Because I don't have a lot of time to. So here's my Bezier curve. I select this Bezier curve, and then I increase the stroke obviously to somewhere around 5. And when I click, I draw, and you can see it's just a linear curve. So it draws a linear Bezier curve as I showed you. When I click and drag again, it draws a quadratic Bezier curve. Look how amazing that is. And mind you, that mind this, that wherever I'm moving the mouse, it's moving the maximum or the minimum point accordingly. So for example, I want to set it over here. So it's getting the 25% control point and moving it all the way over here. Right. So now when I click again, it's gonna convert it into a cubic Bezier curve by moving the 75% or 0.75 control point according to where I'm gonna be moving my mouse. So it's gonna do something like this, and I'll just create this funny looking shape. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another Bezier curve, just like the one we did in Illustrator. So we have this line, and we click and draw over here. This is a quadratic Bezier, and voila, we have a cubic Bezier curve like this. So it was pretty basic and simple. I hope you understood my message that I was trying to convey. You understand the idea of Bezier curves.